Okay, so today's daf is daf Yud Beis, and we are going to start from the bottom of daf Yud Aleph on the days. Thank you so much. Today's also, I think, the fourth day of Hanukkah. If I have my numbers correct, today's the fourth day of Hanukkah. Okay, Tanu Rabbanim. We're right at the bottom of daf Yud Aleph on Beis. The last thing we learned is that the discussion for Ibra Chodesh and for Kiddush Chodesh, and I'm sorry, for Ibra Shana, the psak has to come, the discussion has to be by day, just like Mishpat. We learn it from Tiku B'Chodesh Shofar, B'Kes Elohim Chagenu, Ki Choik L'Yisrael Hu Mishpat L'Lekeyach. Tanu Rabbanim, Ein Ma'abrin Es Hashana B'Shnei Rachim. In a hunger year, you don't add a month to the year. What does adding a month to the year have any impact on a year of hunger? Zokrachi L'Bishakala HaTfua. The tvua from last season would have been used up, and we want to get ready to use the winter wheat that grew now before Pesach. But if you push off Pesach, then the wheat from the winter remains also until the second day of Pesach. So therefore, since as it is, food is scarce, we want to be matir the new crop as soon as possible. Tanya, we learned. Rabbi Omer, there's a story that's recounted in Melachim, I believe. V'ishba, this is a story that happened with Elisha. V'ishba mibal shalisha, which is a place. V'yavi Elisha lakim, they brought to the man of God, meaning to the Navi, to Elisha, lechem bikurim, they brought bikurim, which means the first thing that was ready for them for this year's crop. What was it that they brought? Esrim lechem sa'irim. It was 20 loaves of bread from barley. The carmel b'tzekloinoi. I'm not sure what the carmel b'tzekloinoi is. I think it's some type of fresh flour. V'yomer tein lom v'yachelu. And what did Elisha say as soon as he received it? He said, "This, give it out. Let the oil eat right away. Don't hold it." So let's see what the Gemara dashes from this pasuk. Rabbi Yomer, v'ishba mibal shalisha. V'yavei la'isha lakim lechem bikurim esrim lechem sorim. Ve'ein loch kala b'chol eretz Yisrael levashel peresea yois mibal shalisha. The city of Baal Shalisha was a place where from all the cities in Eretz Yisrael, their produce was always ready the first. It was always the one to ripen the first. So clearly, this was the very first product that grew from all of Eretz Yisrael in that season. V'afal pikein loy bichra ela min echad. The only min that they had was this siyorim. Nothing else was ready because that's what they brought for him as the first thing. Shema Toimar chitin. You might say, okay, it was chitin that was ripened, that was ready. Tamadai Misorim. The pasuk says that the gift that was given to Elisha, the bikurim, so to speak, was made out of barley. Shema Toimar Lifnei Omer. You might think that this ripened early and this bikurim was brought to Elisha before Pesach, before the Omer. Talmud Loimer Tein Lem V'Yachelu. He allowed him to eat it right away, which means it was no longer Chodesh. Means it must have been after the Omer, which means the very first crop that was ready from all of the crops that grew all over Eretz Yisrael was this barley. And the first was ready very late after Pesach. And that's why they were able to eat it right away. So Teilam V'Yachelu Achar Omer, it must have been after the Omer. Otherwise, how could they eat it? They would have had to wait until the carbon Omer. Hayu Omer is when it was said. Me'ata or Emor Me'ata Achar Omer Hayu. This was after the Omer. Emor Me'ata, let's say from this information that we're able to glean, really, they should have made this year into Ibiyar because none of the pairs were ready. And we learned one of the reasons why you push off you push off Pesach, make an Ibiyar, is because none of the fruits and vegetables, or really none of the fruits and grain, have been ripened yet. As Rashi says, because the pears weren't ready. When the month of Nisan arrived, most of the produce was not yet ready to be harvested. We see from this pasuk that it was after the 16th day of Nisan, because the Omer had been prod already, and the only thing that was already ready to be harvested were barley. You wouldn't consider Pesach Chodesh Aviv if nothing was ripened yet. So why Taka did Elisha not push off Pesach by 1 month? Why didn't he add an extra Ador if none of the crops were ready? It must be it was a year of hunger. And Rashi is Bekroy Mishkachas. So I guess if you look up the Psukim, you'll see, in fact, that it was a year of hunger, and therefore everybody wanted to find produce as soon as possible. So even though there was very little available, they didn't want to push off. Elisha did not want to push off Pesach. He wanted the heter of the Chodesh to come as soon as possible, because as it is, food was scarce. Tanu Rabban, Ein Mavir Nes Hashana Lefnei Rosh Hashanah. When they want to sit down to make a decision on making an Ibriyar, they're not allowed to do it prior to Rosh Hashanah before. So that would be Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Tevesh, Shavat, Adar. It would be 6 months before. You can't start that early. The Imavrua, and if they did make their psak before Rosh Hashanah, Einem Uberes. Now, there's many reasons why you shouldn't be able to, but let's see what Rashi says. I would say right off the bat, one simple reason is how are they going to figure out? There's so many things that are almost last minute, like are the parish ready and stuff like that. How are they going to know before Rosh Hashanah if the parish are going to be ready next Pesach? But that's not what Rashi says. Rashi says, "Ein yoshvim bezdin kodim Rosh Hashanah la'ayin v'loymar tis aber shana zu b'shnei adorim mipnei she'shikcha v'davar kodim she'yagia u'mezalz li b'chometz." What's going to happen is people are going to forget that they made a second Ador, and people who don't chap are going to think that now is Pesach, when really now is Ador base, and they're going to see people eating chametz, and they're going to think, hey, we don't have to be so makbid on Pesach. And people are going to start losing their respect of Pesach. So therefore, if it's fresh in people's minds, and now is an Ibiyar, they'll understand it's not Pesach. It's not Pesach now. But if they only announce it 6 months earlier, by the time Pesach comes around, many people won't know, and they'll think that you don't have to be makbid on chametz on Pesach. So that's why you can't do it that early. And the mivru einim uberes, it won't even work. Avol, b'pnei atchak. What could there be a tchak that would force them to want to convene early? Zok Rashi Shema lo yehei sham bezdin mufla samach lader. They're concerned today we have a big oilim together, a bezdin together. Now is a good time to discuss it. We might not be able to get together later on. There's tzoros and Klal Yisrael. There's oppression. Oy Shema Yovai Hamelech Adoimi v'Ya'akev al Yodon me'avrenaisa. Maybe the Goyish king won't allow us to do that. Why in the world would the Goyish king care? So the Mefarshim tell us, I think Rashi might tell us even later, that the taxes that they used to collect would be before Yom Tov. Even the Goyish kings would collect taxes before Yom Tov. So by pushing off Pesach, it's going to defer the collection of their tax payments by a month. Therefore, they might not want that. Umaydin legoyla acher Rosh Hashanah miyad shivernua. What they could do is right after Rosh Hashanah, they could decide that this year there'll be 2 others, and then they can publicize it right away. Nevertheless, they can't decide, okay, we'll make 2 Tishreis, 2 Cheshvans. The only month that they're allowed to say there's an extra month is in Adar. And the Rashbam says, they can't make any other of the months a double month. Why is that? What's so special about Adar? That Adar is the only month that they add to. Zogt Toisvis, the Kol Shar Chadoshim Ein Marvin. You know why? Because it says in Megillas Esther, L'chodesh Shnei Masar Hu Chodesh Adar. The only time you find in Tanakh where a month is mentioned along with what number month it is Chodesh Adar. And therefore, V'ma'avrin Achas Mishar Chadoshim, if you're ever going to make an Ibir in any one of the other months, loy have Adar Shnei Moser. That would make Adar the 13th month. But the fact that says in Megillas Esther that the 12th month is always Adar, it must mean that the only month that you could double up on is Chodesh Adar. Break the Gemara. Aini, is that so? A cryptic message was once sent to Rava, and there's a discussion. Why was this message sent in such a cryptic fashion? Maybe we were concerned that the Goyish king won't know what the discussion was over here. So let's read a very interesting cryptic message, and there's a long marsha on explaining what's going on here. It's very tifazachen. I cannot say that I understood the marsha, but I'll just throw out some ideas that the marsha discusses. So this cryptic message was sent.
I just want to point out, before you get to that you asked why we were worried about them not declaring an Iber because the Goyim would stop them. On the Yevonim, one of the things they wanted to stop was Rosh Chodesh. Surprised they didn't mention that.
Oh, that's true. So it's mamish the lunar strikes again.
That's right.
Exactly. They were messing with our calendar.
Right.
Gavaldi. So you're going to enjoy the Marsha, because the Marsha talks about the sanctity of the Jewish calendar and where it comes from. Only in the Jewish calendar do you ever find there'll be 13 months in a year. In the Goyish calendar, no matter how you slice it or dice it, they only have 12 months. So the Marsha talks about that. Maybe we'll look at it together quickly, and together maybe we'll understand it. Anyway, Zug Bami Rekes, a pair of Talmidei Chachamim came from Rekes. Rekes, Rashi says, is Tveria. V'tovsu Nesher, and they were caught by the eagle. And the Rashi says that the eagle is Chel Parsium, a band of Persians. There's other pshatim. It could have been regular gangsters. They were during their travels. They were captured. It wasn't a good thing for them. They were in grave danger. Uviyadam, you know what they were bringing? For me, Rava said, Devarim Hanasa Baluz. They were bringing things that were manufactured in Luz. What's manufactured in Luz? Umay niu tchelas. Zok Rashi, Devarim Hanasa Baluz, tchelas. Where do they make tchelas? In which city? Beluz Oishanasha. That's how they would make it. Luz is also the city that had no losers, because all the losers lived forever. In Luz, you lived forever. That was a city we lived forever. So it's funny it was called Luz, because they were not losers. They lived a long time. Kedarmina Besoita, he Luz, that's the city of Luz, Shetzoivin Bat Chelas, where they would die Chelas. Okay? And B'schus HaRachamim, in the schus of Rachamim, U'B'schusam, and in their schus, well, the Mashal talks about this as well. What schus am I referring to? Yotzu B'Sholom, they were able to get out. They were able to escape. V'Amuse Yerechoi Nachshoin, what does that mean? Nosi shebe'eretz Yisrael shehu mizera nachshon ben Aminodov rishon l'nesiyim. So one of the progeny of Nachshon, meaning one of the nesiyim, bikshu l'kvoya nitziv echad. He wanted to add a month, and nitziv is referring to a month, as Rashi is bikshu l'hoizav chodesh echad al hashon l'avra. V'lo yenichan adoimi halos, and this adoimi, which means the malchus harashah, goes with Shemar Aleim and wouldn't let him add a month. Aval Balei Asuvois, but the Talmidei Chachamim and the Tzaddikim Nesfu, they got together, I guess, clandestinely. The Kavuloi Nitziv Echad, and they decided that they are going to convene and add a month. When did they convene? When did this discussion happen? B'Yerach Shemeis by Aaron HaKohen, in the month where Aaron HaKohen George is found, which is Chodesh Av, Ba'av. Alma, the point that we're bringing from this cryptic message is that you see, in fact, they discussed this and they came to a decision before Rosh Hashanah. They did this in Chodesh Av. So how could you say Ein Ma'arben Yis Hashanah Lefnei Rosh Hashanah? Zok Gemara, Chashuv Mechashve. They're allowed to sit and discuss and calculate. But Goloi Loi Magalu, they can come to a conclusion and decide before they proclaim it to the public. There they have to wait until after Rosh Hashanah. As the Rashi says, why we want to make sure that come Adar Beis, everyone's going to remember, so it shouldn't lead to a zilzul of Pesach. So that's the conclusion of our Gemara. Now the Gemara is drilling down a little bit into the details of this cryptic message. My mashma the Hainitziv lishna de Yarchu. They sent this cryptic message. Why? Where do you see anything from here that the word Nitziv means a month? The Chsiv, it says in the pasuk, Ulishloima shnei masha Nitzivim. He had 12 appointees. Al Kol Yisrael, from Klal Yisrael. The Chilkulu es Hamelach ves Beisoi Chodesh B'Shana. Each appointee was responsible for the mizonis of the household for 1 month per year. So that's why Nitziv is a mamuna for a month. That's where we get the correlation between Nitziv and a month. Frank Gemara, but another pasuk says, "Unitziv echad asher ba'aretz." There's only one Nitziv, and the Gemara says there's a machlokes what this Nitziv was. Rav Yehuda, Rav Nachman, Chadomer echad mamuna al kulam. It doesn't mean it's not a month. It means there's one mamuna that was the supervisor of the 12 mamunim for the 12 months. The Chadomer connect Chodesh Iber. They needed a special mamuna to take care of those years where there was an Ibriyar. Okay, we have a couple of extra minutes, so I do want to glance at the Mashal, because there's some, I don't understand the whole Mashal clearly, but there are some nice ideas that the Mashal raises that I think we would enjoy. It's a very long Mashal here, so I'm just going to run through it and see what we could glean, what could understand. There's a lot of problems with this Gemara. Hakushis, ma inyan shekosvu v'sholchu kol zeberemes. First of all, why did this message have to be so cryptic? Number one. Uma inyan shezachrei, that they remembered shahayabadim tchelas haba milos. Why is it relevant to our whole discussion that they had tchelas? Why is that relevant? Uma loshen b'schus harachimim. What do you mean b'schus harachimim? They got freed. Uma inyan shelo yinichu malchus, that the malchus did not allow them to make Ibiyar. So there's a lot of questions on what this message was. Why was it relevant in the message to Rava that this decision to be Ma'aber Deshana was made enough? And if the whole purpose of this whole cryptic message was only to proclaim even to Rava that yes, they did this before Shoshana, why the whole story? Why did we need this whole long story? All that was relevant to our discussion was there was a cryptic message sent that they made an Ibur Shana in Av. What about all that other information? Why is that relevant to our discussion here? So Zok to Rashba, Zok to Helig Marsha, Hamavur, Kinisi Yishmael Hayayud Beis. They were 12 Nisim of Yishmael, as is mentioned and listed in the Parshas Chayesara. Avolamayla alayim Nisi Yisrael. Nisi Yisrael are greater than the Nisi Yishmael. Why? Nisi Yishmael ein lam yichas av me Avram. Rak yichas shivcha me'imam Ager. They don't have yichas to Avram. They only have yichas from their mother Hagar. Imam Hagar. I'm sorry. V'zeh shekoseh behem shneim asher Nisim li'moisam. They're Nisim with yichas to their mother, not to their father. The Ratzaloymar mitzadein. Avon Nisi Yisrael yeshem yichus av lemishpechoisam lebeisavoisam. So again, I don't understand what this means. They have yichus to their mother. Hagar's husband was Avram, so I don't understand how there's that disconnect. But the Torah calls them connected to their mother, not connected to the schus of Avram. V'alkein al pi yichus av shemimenu nimshach b'chayra. Since the koyach al Yisrael comes from the father, and the koyach ha-b'chayra l'gabe pishnayim comes from the father, therefore the Nisi Yisrael got an extra one. Not mehem yud gimel Nisim al yidei ha-b'chayra sheyesh liYosef shenechlach l'shnei shvatim. So that's why they got a double chalik, and Yosef is 2 shvatim, which now means there's 13. Nisim and Nisim as well. When they doubled Yosef, they gave him 2 Nisim. V'zehu soid ibur. This is the soid of ibur. Again, I don't know what these things are. These are very at least we want to read the words. Sheyishro machashvim yud beis chodshei halavana neged yud beis shvatim. And that's a study Ibur, why we have 12 months plus 1 month. The oit chodesh Ibur neged shvatim shel Yosef. Shenechlak leblei shvatim, because Yosef got split into 2 shvatim, netting us 13 shvatim. Then beis adorim, vosab is ador is connected to 2 shvatim of Yosef, because we know Mazel Ador is dogim. Shemazle dogim kibechasa shel Yosef, where Yaakov told him v'yidgu l'roy b'cher v'aretz. So dogim is very appropriate for Yosef, because Yosef had the bracha that it should be like dogim. Ulezah amru. And that's why we say she'in zari shel Yosef nimsar rak biyad zara shel Yosef. We know why did Yaakov pick up and leave base Lavan when Yosef was born? Because then he was prepared with the necessary ammunition and armaments to fight against the Koyach of Esav. Shenemar, it says, Vaya base Esav was Lakash, and the base Yaakov was Aish, and the base Yosef was Lahava. A fire with a flame can take on the Kash. For who? Lefi. When Yaakov got the Bechayra and he got the bracha from Yitzchak, Nasan Yaakov lios Moshel ba'achiv Esav. That's how Yaakov got power over Esav. V'cholza Nasan Yaakov liYosef, and Yaakov passed this on to Yosef. Shenemar v'aninis hati lochem shchem echad alachecha k'mafurish v'perek yeshnoichlin v'lezeh av sheyishmoel sheyesh lo yud beis nesim l'imoisam. Even though Yishmael has 2 Nesiim from his mother, and from by his Melchamos, and therefore in the Melchamos that Yishmael has with Klal Yisrael, sometimes they're even able to win Esav. Sometimes the Muslims can beat the Christians. We see that through history. They will never be able to destroy Amalek ad la'asid sheyigdal zarei shel Yosef u'Mashiach, until the Zerah of Yosef and the Mashiach when Yosef arises, Yadam Yinatru es Esav. That's how Yishmael, when the Mashiach when Yosef arises, that'll give the koyach for the Yishmael to destroy Esav. Yisrael you the Mila. I'm sorry. Forget Yishmael and Esav are always fighting back and forth. But when we have our Mashiach when Yosef, through that Klal Yisrael will be able to destroy Esav. You b'mayla b'Yosef Yishmael. They'll be even more powerful than Yishmael. Sheyu Gimel Yud Gimel Nesiim al Yidei Yosef shenechlek lebeis. The 12 Nesiim of Yishmael allows them to fight and struggle with Esav, but triumph that will come through Klal Yisrael, who has 13 Nesiim. V'zeu soy de'iber. So these are tifazach. I'm reading the words, but I don't really know the depth of their meaning. But it's an eye opener. We read Gemaras and we don't realize there's so much more beneath the surface that we don't even realize. Yisrael Yud Gimel Chadoshim. The Jewish calendar is going to have 13 months. It's bigger than the year of Esav, which is Yud Beis Chadoshim Lachama, because they follow the solar calendar. Omar. That's what this zug habal, this zug that came with the cryptic message. Ki Yisrael nimshulu lezug yoinim. We're compared to a pair of doves. She'ein yiskokin rak lebazugon. What is the beauty of a dove? A dove is not mizana. It stays with its partner forever. And this cryptic message was referring to Edom and Yishmael. V'yamar v'dima malchus Yishmael and Nesher. We're comparing the cryptic message was comparing the malchus of Yishmael to an eagle. Al shem roiv toikif malchusoi ulefishu tamei mitzad imoy. And since it's tamei mitzad imoy, because the Nesher is tamei, dimil and Nesher shu oif hadoiris. It's an oif that a predator. V'tamei it's tamei. V'chein dimu b'perek achoyvo. La'oif Tamei. Yishmael was compared to Noif Tamei, so the Nesher is referring to Bnei Yishmael. V'yomer Shabamei Rekes. These messengers came from Rekes. She Tveria, she Nikras Rekes, because Tveria is also referred to as Rekes. Al Shem Reikanim Shabach. V'sham Hayasoid Ibur Hazeh. In Tveria was this side Ibur. I don't know what it's saying. V'yomer Shetavsu Nesher. They were captured by a Nesher, the Ainu Yishmael. Klal Yisrael was captured by Yishmael. Shetachas Yodai Roiv Kibbutz Nefutzes Yisrael. Most communities of Israel are under the Muslim rule. V'Amar, and they said as well, these Shluchim, V'Yodim Dvarim Hanasa Beluz, which we touched as they had Chelas. She'ein Shamisa. But here it's referring to Luz because Luz has the Mila that no one dies in Luz. And this is the Soita Iber. Again, I don't know what these are. Shehu Remez al Devar Asidi V'Nitzchi L'Chalis Zar Shalesav. This is a cryptic message about the Geula and about how the forces of Klal Yisrael are going to overcome and triumph the forces of Yishmael, which is Bamish Shasa Geula, which is so appropriate for Chanukah, which is also a time of Geula, where Klal Yisrael is able to stand strong against our foes. L'chalas Zar Shalesav, the Koichai, we know the Esav is referred to the Samuel, V'zeh Shekasav, my Niu, Tcheles, that's why the Gemara explains that loses Tcheles. Why? Shehu asoid Tcheles doim l'yam, doim l'kisei hakovet. Tcheles means it's a connection directly to the kisei hakovet, to the Rebbeinu Shalom, which is the power that we need to overcome Edom. Ta'anu she'oz yiyeh hakisei sholem. V'zeu shekosav b'schus harachamim. What did the cryptic message mean about the rachamim? Ta'anu she'yiyeh shom harachamim sholem. Then the rachamim from HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be complete. She'ein Hashem v'kisei sholem u'b'schus zeh yetzu b'sholem mitachas yad Yishmael. Through this, we will get through peacefully out of the Yad Yishmael, v'amusa yirei nachshoin, and the Nesim of Klal Yisrael who perish, soid ha'iber the amusa yirei nachshoin asher mimenu hanesim b'malachim u'melech hamashiach. Bikshu, what do they want to do? Bikshu l'kfoya nitziv hu chodesh ibor. They wanted to create a month of Ibor. Haroimes l'zari shel Yosef. Chodesh ibor means they wanted to strengthen this koyach of Yosef, which is the clincher, which when it awakens and arises, it will allow us to triumph over our enemies and bring the Gula. Shenechlok l'bei shvatim, my beis adorim, shemas le'dogim v'loshem rabim, v'asher b'yodoi yipoil Esav v'koichai. V'alkein lo yinichu adoimi haloz. That's why Adam didn't allow us to make that extra month, because that is the month that we will use, that koich we will tap into to triumph over Edom and to bring Mashiach. Shumalchus roimi, the koichai samach mem. Avol balei asuvois, but the tzaddikim nesvu b'malchus u'shmoel l'kvoya nitziv echod v'hotzuchu lasa shei b'seisher. We had to do it quietly. Ubisoid, why? Shelo yagishu adoimi the koichai samach mem b'zeh. We had to do it clandestinely. Klal Yisrael works behind the scenes to accomplish what they need to. They can't do it open in the face of the enemy because the enemy will not allow us to do it. And that's why they had this discussion only in Av. So the Doimi won't understand what's going on there. They won't think that that's what they were trying to do. That's the last chodesh that they're going to think we're going to sprout the geula out of, so they won't be on guard. The Esav, the koichai, while Yisrael the amur le'il beside the Iber, and that's what we said earlier. The side the Iber, the gizlaya rekichin. Remember, we said that one of the reasons why they would consider making an extra month is because the birds are weak, v'amayadakin, and the animals are still small, v'avav leimata, and the pears aren't yet ripened. That's also symbolic. But shaloim the gizlaya, shahu knesset Yisrael. The Meshilon Leyoina, Rekichan, we are compared to a small little dove. Ve'elam koyach, we don't have the strength to overcome our tormentors, our enemies. Gamim Raya, even the little animals, which once again is referring to Klal Yisrael. Shem Yisrael, Shenim Shalu Lesef Zura, Yisrael, Adakan, we're weak, we're young, we're small, we're not developed. Ve'elam koyach begolus, we don't have koyach to triumph on the scholars. V'zimni the Aviv, which is referring to the payers, Shuzman Aviv u'tzmichas ha'geula adayin lo imota. The time did not yet come for the Geula. V'alkein Shapiras, that's why it's a good idea for us to add an extra month. V'yisifas al shata da yom tlosen shusoida iber neged zara shel Yosef sheyechala zara shel Esav al yodoi v'oz yakisei v'Hashem shalom emher v'yemenu amen selah. This is like a wild marsha. It's like a middle of nowhere, and it's making our Gemara, which I thought was like a dry technical Gemara on being Ma'abed Shana, into a very tiva kabbalah to gezach, and using the different koiches of Klal Yisrael to overcome the goyim and to bring the geula, which we should be zoicha to as the marsha concludes. B'mher v'yameinu amen. The mashma blew my mind. I mean, we read the words. I don't know what the Soida Iber is, but there's a lot of Kabbalah to Gezach and how The Ibriyar is koich shel Yosef, and that wakes up. That's the koich we need to overcome and to triumph over Esau. Okay, so more about it. Tanu Rabbanan. Ein ma'arvin hashana loy mishana lachaverta. There's a little bit of a discussion what this means, but Rashi learns mishana lachaverta means im shana haba tzricha la'aver. What if we realize that next year things are going to be a problem with alignment, but we figure instead of waiting until next year to make the Ibiyar, let's already make the Ibiyar this year. That you're not allowed to do. Mishana haba tzricha la'aver ein ma'arvin shana zu mipnei tzarch shana haba. Ela hatzricha tesaber. This year, if you need it, you make an Ibiyar this year. Don't say because next year we're going to need it. Let's preempt it. You don't do that. And you never allow 3 years in a row to be nibiyar. That's really going to throw the seasons off. You're going to end up pushing off the third Nisan if you have 3 nibiyars in a row. On the third year, Nisan is going to be in the middle of the summer. That's not going to work. Tosfos tells us every 19 years there has to be 7 ibiyars. That's the cheshbon. So why would you need to do this? Tosfos goes to a cheshbon. What if for some reason 3 years in a row they weren't able to make an ibiyar, so we're behind in ibiyars? Are you allowed to catch up? That's what this discussion is. And the Gemara is going to give us reasons why you would have wanted an ibiyar but you couldn't make. Right off the bat, a shnei b'tzuris, you're not supposed to make an ibiyar, right? So if things happen that you couldn't make an ibiyar, you still can't make 3 one after the other. Omer Rab Shimon, Ma'aseh Rabbi Akiva, Shoyichavish Beveis Asur. Rabbi Akiva was in jail already by the authorities. The Ibar Shalish Shalim Zuachazu, and they were Ma'aber 3 years in a row. Omer Loi, they told him that's not a raya. They told Rabbi Shimon that's not a raya. Misham Raya, forget it. That proves our point. Bezdin Yoshu v'kavu achas bisman. Zok Rashi, what does this mean? Again, there's a discussion. They're showing what this means. But Rashi says, "V'lo Ibru Gimel Shana Ritzufos." They didn't make 3 years in a row in Ibiyar. V'lo Zu Achar Zu Hayu, and even the 3 Ibiyars that they made, that they discussed with Rabbi Akiva, was not one after the other. Rather, El Mepnei Rabbi Akiva Chacham Gadol Haya Ubaka B'Ibiyar Hashana. Since they knew Rabbi Akiva was a major authority when it comes to these things, and they knew he's going to be killed now, so he wouldn't be around for the next Ibiyar and the one after that. They figured let's discuss it all with him in advance. Bo Bezdin v'Yoshu Imoy, but I knew the Ibur Gimel Shanim, and they thought they planned the future years in advance. V'loy Ritzufos, and they didn't make 3 years in a row in Ibiyar. But they discussed with Rabbi Akiva how they should schedule the next 3 Ibiyars that will occur over the next 10 years. The Amrinon Mipnei Adchak Chashuvim Echashvinon Galil Me'lo Megalinon. We just said that if there's a tchak, meaning we need to have a bezdin together, there's an opportunity to have a bezdin together where you can make these decisions, just don't make the announcements. And that's all that they did. But there's another pshat in Rashi. You know what that means? Tanakama nami b'ha ka'asar shelo ya'anu be'iber shalosh shanim zuach hazu b'yeshiva achas b'afil over bizmanim. Could be there was a tzad that you're not even allowed to do this in one sitting. Even to schedule future ibiyars, you're not allowed to do in one sitting. But again, there was a special reason why they did it. Tanu Rabbanan, ein ma'aber nesashana loy b'shviyis v'loy b'matzoy shviyis. You can't do it on a shemitah year. It's very simple. On shemitah, you can't plant. The last thing you want to do is make those prohibitions of shemitah, which as it creates a difficulty. Make that longer? No, you don't make it longer. And the year after shviyis, you haven't planted a whole shviyis, so there's a scarcity of produce. So the next year you want to bring Pesach as soon as possible to be matter in the wheat. We don't want to push it off. So that was one of the discussions. You could have had a Shnas B'Tzoros, and then you had Shvius, and then you had Matzai Shvius. There were 3 years in a row where they couldn't schedule an Ibiyar. That's why they would have had to add more Ibiyars. Anyway, Masai Regin Laver. When's a good time to make an Ibiyar? Erev Shvius, because that gives you extra time to plant, and it pushes off the Shvita year. Shalbei Shem Gamliel. They wouldn't make it a Matzai Shvius. But the problem is, if they did a Matzai Shvius, wouldn't that cause great difficulty? Why would it cause great difficulty? Because now you have to wait an extra month till the produce is ready, and as it is, things are scarce because you just had a Shemitah year. Zok Rashi, no, they didn't have that problem. You know why? Let's look at the very first wide line of Rashi. So, based Shimon Ma'avim and Matzai Shvius, Ve'ein chosheshin im kila yoshin. They weren't afraid that they ran out of food. You know why? The kasavar mavin yerek utvua mechutz la'Eretz Yisrael. They held that you were allowed to import. So big deal. We couldn't produce in Eretz Yisrael. We'll import from chutz la'aretz. Things that grew even on Shemitah, you could buy from chutz la'aretz. The tiram oimer shel shviyas. And the carbon oimer that was brought on the Shemitah year were matter, all of those products that were produced out of Eretz Yisrael, and they had plenty to eat, so there was no concern about making an Ibayar the year after Shviyas. Zog to Gemara will put it on it tonight, and it would be totally in this machlokes tonight. The Tanya ein mavir yerek lichutz la'aretz la'aretz. Are you allowed to import produce from outside of Eretz Yisrael into Eretz Yisrael? If you can, there's no issue. Make a Shemitah, make an Ibayar even the year after Shemitah. But if you cannot, then you don't want to make an Ibayar the year after Shemitah. My b'nai, Amar Rabbi Chiriyah choshin l'gushein ikb'nai. The halach is that earth of chutz la'aretz is matama, and they don't want to import tumah into Eretz Yisrael. And we're afraid if we import vegetables, some of the earth, when they uproot a vegetable to bring it in, there'll be clumps of earth in the vegetable that wasn't cleaned out, and they're going to also be importing tumah. So that's why they might have prohibited you to bring in any produce from out of Eretz Yisrael. Tanu Rabbanan, a marvin hashana b'pnei tumah. You don't do it because of tumah. What does tumah have to do with Abed Lashana? Zogt the Rashi, some interesting scenarios. Either the Nasi was sick, and they figured that he has time to live, he'll probably die Erev Pesach, which means Gans Klal Yisrael will become Tamei because they'll have to go to his Levaya. Oisho Yerubam Tamein B'Soif Adar, or they knew that everybody was Tamei, V'cholsa Efer Apara, and they ran out of Paraduma. So because of that, they want to push off Pesach so they'll have time to be Matar the people. You don't do that. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Ma'avrin, you could push it off for that. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Ma'ishka B'Chizkiya Melech Yehuda. There's a story with Chizkiya Melech Yehuda. She'ibir Sashanim B'Pnei HaTumah. He did make an Ibir because of Tumah. And the case was, Shenitmu B'Mei Achaz Aviv Me'avodah Zarah. All of Klal Yisrael became Tamei because in his father's days they were Ovid Avodah Zarah. So Lechashim L'Torah. V'hayu Chizkiya Machzir L'Mutav. Chizkiya came and was trying to clean up Klal Yisrael. But he knew that he couldn't be Mitayar everybody on time for Pesach. So he figured he push Pesach off so we can at least have this carbon Pesach b'tahira. So what happened was, and he knew he did the wrong thing because you're not allowed to be b'abashon b'tatuma. Uvikesh rachamim alatmai, and he davened for himself. Yechsiv ki marbis ha'am rabas me'afray mu'minashi yisachas lo yitar. Many people were in Torah. The Gemara is going to ask a question in a second. If Rabbi Yehuda says ma'avrin, so why would Chizkiya have done tshuva for it? He didn't do anything wrong. But here you see Chizkiya did something wrong because ubikesh rachem alatzmai shiyum chaloy ovid. Look, come apart. However, Rabbi Yehuda ma'avrin, if you're allowed to do it, lama bikesh rachem alatzmai. You asked rachem if you made a mistake. You did an aveir, but you're allowed to do it. So why would Chizkiya have been asking for rachamim for making dibiyar mipnei tumah if it's perfectly allowed? Zok to Gemara, going back to the story of Chizkiya. They ate the Korban Pesach not as per the halacha, meaning so that's what he did. Because Chizkiya was davening for Klal Yisrael. Lemar Hashem atoy v'chaper ba'ad. Hashem should be Michael Klal Yisrael. They were over Avodah Zarah, and now Baruch Hashem they're coming back. Rab Shimon there's a third shita. Im mipnei atoma ivruah. If they added a month because of Tumah, Mi'uberes, it will still be Mi'uberes. So it sounds like you're not supposed to, but if they did it, it'll work anyway. Ella, if that's the case, why, according to Rabbi Yehuda, who you're allowed to be Ma'aved Chodesh, why did Chizkiya have to ask Rachamim? The teretz is, Shein Ma'abrin Ella Adar, who Ibar Nisan Ben Nisan. You're not allowed to add a month, only Adar, and it has to be added in Chodesh Adar. Once Nisan arrives, you can no longer say, okay, we're making this the Adar Sheni. And he was very late to make the Ibiyar, and after Nisan had arrived, he said, no, this is not Nisan, we're making it into Adar. And that was his up. Rab Shimon ben Yehuda says, Mishum Rab Shimon, Mipnei Sheheisi Es Yisrael, Lato is Pesach Sheni. Fakert, what he did was, he told them, the Avera was not that he added a year. He didn't add a month. He told everybody to make the Korban Pesach by Pesach Sheni. So now the Gemara is going to analyze what happened over here. Amar, Rabbi Yehuda Aimer Ma'avrin, Alma, East Leila Rabbi Yehuda, Tumah D'chuyo Hi B'tzibur. Now the halach is, if all of Klal Yisrael is Tamei, you're allowed to bring the Korban. right? But there's a discussion. How does it work when Roy Klaish was Tame, you could bring the carbon anyway? Is it Tumah Tchuyi B'tzibur, which means B'di'evid, if there's no other way, so they could bring it B'tumah, but we'll try to do anything we could to avoid it. Or Tumah Hudra B'tzibur. Lechatchila, there's no problem. You don't have to try to find some other Eitzah. Go on and bring the carbon B'tumah. So it must be that Rabbi Yehuda holds Tumah Tchuyi B'tzibur. Why? Because he holds Ma'avrin. Why would they bother being Ma'avrin? Rabbi Yehuda says for a Tumah, you're allowed to be Ma'avrin a Chodesh. Why should you bother? If it's Tumah Hudra B'tzibur, Tumah is no reason to push off the month. There's no reason for it. Because the Chatchila, just bring the carbon when everyone's Tumah. The fact that Rabbi Yehuda says you should be Ma'aved a Chodesh, if it's Tumah, vice the Chodesh, it's Tumah the Chuy B'tzibur, and you have to find a way to avoid the Tumah, so add a month to avoid the Tumah. But the problem is, if you hold Rabbi Yehuda Tumah Tchuyi B'tzibur, I'm going to prove to you that Rabbi Yehuda Tumah Hudra B'tzibur, and then there's no reason to push off Pesach just because everybody's Tumah. But Tanya, we learned tzitz, the tzitz that the Kohen Gadol wore, ben sheyesh al metzchay, ben sheyesh al metzchay, whether or not it's on his forehead, miratza. Any tumah that happens in the Beis Hamikdash, it makes it work anyway. Divrei Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, oidei al mitzchay, if the tzitz is on his forehead, if he's wearing it, that's when it's miratza. Ein oidei al mitzchay, ein miratza. But if he's not wearing it, it's not miratza. So Rabbi Shimon told Rabbi Yehuda, how could you hold like that? Amar le Rabbi Shimon, what about Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim Yechia? A Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim, he wears the big day lavan, and he's not wearing his tzitz the whole time. So while he's wearing the big day lavan, she'eino al metzchay, the tzitz is not on his forehead, umaratze. And we know if tumah happens, even in Yom Kippur, on Yom Kippur, it's still going to be maratze. But how could it be maratze according to you if he is not wearing the tzitz? Amar le Rabbi Yehuda said, Hanech l'yom Kippurim. Don't ask a kasha for Yom Kippurim. Shetuma hutra b'tzibur. You don't need the tzitz to be maratza. If everyone is tamei, there's no problem. L'chatchila, you can go do the avodah. So you see clearly, Rabbi Yehuda Tumah Hutra B'tzibur. So Rabbi Yehuda Tumah Hutra B'tzibur, why would Rabbi Yehuda hold that you can add a month to push off Pesach if everyone's tamei? Why bother? If everyone's tamei, bring the carbon out. Ask a question on Rabbi Yehuda of our brayta that we quoted. Rabbi Yehuda Ma'avrid, and then a second later, Rabbi Yehuda brings a raya where it was an avla that he did it. Why would he be asking rachamim if according to Rabbi Yehuda that's the right thing to do? Ella, what you have to say is chisura mechsura v'achikatani. The brayta is missing some information, and the Tanakama said ein ma'abur nisashana b'pnei atoma. The Tanakama said, "L'chatchila, you're not supposed to be married to Shana, but if you are married to Shana, b'di'evet it works." Rabbi Yehuda took a stronger position. Rabbi Yehuda Omer einemu beres. Even if you try to be married to Shana mipnei atoma, your decision is invalid and it's nissen. It's not other. The Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yehuda brought a raya that it's einemu beres from Chizkiah. Because Chizkiah did it mipnei atoma, and he had to do tshuva because it was novel. It didn't work. Zog to Gemara, Ihachi. So then let's look at the third shita. The third shita was Reb Shimon Omer, Im mipnei atomei brua muberes. Doesn't that sound like the b'di'evet? You're not supposed to be ma'aber shana. If you did it the atomah, b'di'evet it works. Isn't that exactly how we're now describing the Tanakama? As saying like you shouldn't, but if you do it, it works. How you Tanakama? So what is the chiluk and halacha between the Tanakama's position and Reb Shimon's position? Amar Rava lechatchila ikabedayu. The machlokes is whether or not lechatchila you're allowed to be ma'aber deshana if it's tamei or not. So Zok Rashi, who holds what? The Tanakama Savar, the Tanakama Ka'amar ein ma'aber lechatchila. They just say lechatchila you're not allowed to be ma'aber dechodesh, but the ever it works. Rabbi Shimon ma'aber lechatchila. Rabbi Shimon says ma'aber lechatchila. Rabbi Shimon's words are im mipnei atomei evru muberes, which sounds like b'di'evet. Zok Rashi, no, that's not what he means. But he's only responding to what Rabbi Yehuda said. But I did to Amar Rabbi Yehuda Eina Muberes, since Rabbi Yehuda said that if you wrongfully push off Pesach and add a month because of Tumah, it's not valid. Amar Iu Muberes. He holds no, it will work because he was responding to Rabbi Yehuda. But he holds that Chatchila you can do it. Tanya Mehachi Ein Ma'avrin Esashana B'Pnei Tumah Lechatchila, and Rabbi Shimon Omer Ma'avrin you are allowed to do it Lechatchila. Ella, if that's the case. If you're allowed to push it off So why according to Reb Shimon, who lechatchila allowed to be ma'abed chodesh? So why is Chizkiah doing tshuva? What did he do wrong? Because shein ma'abed other who ibar nisan. He did it too late. Amar Mar. Shein ma'abed other. You only make an ibir by other. But who ibar nisan b'nisan? How did Chizkiah do that? How did he make such a mistake? How could you make two Nisans? How could you make two Nisans? So how could Chizkiah make such a mistake? Once you already were Makadosh, the first Nisan, so you cannot, once you say today is Rosh Chodesh Nisan, you can't change your mind and say, no, I meant Adar Sheni, and next month is Nisan. You can't do that. So Zog to Gemara, so what, how did Chizkiah make this mistake? Zog Gemara, Tobit Shmuel. What he didn't know was Shmuel's halacha. Damar Shmuel, Eim Arvin is Hashana, B'yoim Shloishim Shaladar. It wasn't Mamash Nisan. It was on the day 30. On day 30, technically day 30 can still be part of Adar, because maybe Adar had 30 days in it, and day 31 would be Rosh Chodesh. But even though that's the case, you cannot be Ma'aber Shana anymore on day 30 of Adar. You know why? Since the 30th day of Adar Rishon could have already been Nisan, because it could have been Rosh Chodesh, once we reach that day, you can no longer make an Ibriyar. The Yusavar, and he didn't know that. Well, Yusavar, he thought, the Maisa, yes, day 30 of Adar could be Nisan, but we didn't proclaim it as Adar Beis. We didn't proclaim it as Nisan. It's not Rosh Chodesh. So therefore, we can still say it should be Adar Beis rather than Nisan. Tanya Mihachi, Ein Ma'arvin is Hashana, B'yom Shloishim Shal Adar. You don't decide to add another Adar if it's already the 30th day of Adar Rishon, because it could have possibly been already Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Reb Shimon Yudah Aimer, Mishum Reb Shimon. What was the avla that Chizkiah did? He pushed everybody to bring it by Pesach Sheni instead of bringing the carbon betuma that they would have been allowed to do because of Tumah Hurta B'Tziva. What exactly happened? Amar Rabashi Kagoin Shahoyu Yisrael Mechza Tmei Mechza Tajim. Really, it was 50-50, which Rashi explains not quite. Rashi is lav dafka. It wasn't 50. If you looked at the men, there were more men that were tamei than were tahor. So if you look at the men alone, they surely had a right to bring the carbon Pesach by the first Pesach because Tumah Hurta B'Tzibur. But if you looked at the women, but the women had many more Torah than Tamei. So if you add up all the people of Klal Yisrael, men and women, Roiv would be tar. So that the Tamei people would not be allowed to bring the carbon, they'd have to bring it by Pesach Sheni. But if you only looked at the men, then everybody, Tamei and Torah alike, would be able to bring the carbon because Roiv Klal Yisrael would have been Tamei. And the question is, do you count women in this cheshbon? Meikar Savar Noshim Berishon Chayva. He held that women have a chiyuv to bring a carbon Pesach by Pesach Rishon, just like the men do. So therefore, you look at them as part of the count, which means Roiv of the Klal Yisrael were tar. If Roiv of the Klal Yisrael were tar, then in fact the Tamei people cannot bring the carbon Pesach now. They have to bring it by Pesach Sheni. Noshim Berishon Chayva Davim Utan Tmeim Umiyutan Mitchul Pesach Sheni. And that's why Chizkiah made the decision that you people that are Tamei are the Miyut. Therefore, you cannot bring the carbon by Pesach Rishon. You should bring it by Pesach Sheni. Why did he do tshuva? Because then he held that there's no chiyuv for women to bring the carbon Pesach. They have a right to be part of the carbon Pesach, but they're not mechuyev. Therefore, when you count the Tameim and the Tarim, women are not in the cheshbon. Therefore, if you only look at the men, there were more men that were Tamei than not. And therefore, when you arrive at Klal Yisrael is Tamei, everyone brings the carbon by Pesach Rishon. Gufa, Amar Shmuel, Ein Ma'arvin es Hashana, you don't make an Ibiyar, B'yoim Shloishim Shal Adar, on the 30th day of Adar. Why? Hoyel v'royu l'koivai Nisan. Since it could be made Nisan already, because day 30 could have been Rosh Chodesh already. Ibruamai, what if they wrongfully decided to make an Ibiyar on day 30 of Adar Aleph? Amar Ula, Ein Mikachin es Chodesh. They wouldn't be Mekadosh the Chodesh. So even if they did it, but they're not going to announce, today is Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni. as Rashi says, don't announce anything. Just stay quiet. The Kivin the Royal Lekfoya Nisan, since it could have been Nisan already, you don't announce that this is Adar Sheni. Karina Bay, Zen Nisan Menach Nisan. Elashosky. Don't say anything at all. V'chimoti Reish Yachach Rina, next Rosh Chodesh, then you'll be Mekalish as Nisan. This Rosh Chodesh, don't be Mekalish at all. Kitchu, what if they wrongfully announced this is Rosh Chodesh Adar Beis? My what talacha? Amarava Batal Iber. Then it doesn't count because you're not allowed to pronounce today as Adar Beis when today could have been Nisan. Rab Nachman Amar Uber, it will work Umakudish and it will be Rosh Chodesh. So day Lamed Aleph, day 31 will be Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni. Amalei Rabbi Rab Nachman Mikli. Let's think about this for a second. Mipurya lePischa Klosen Yom. How many days are there between Purim and Pesach? 30 days. Umipurya Darshinan B'chas Pesach. We know 30 days before Yom Tov, you start talking about B'chas Pesach. So Purim time already of Adar Rishon, before they knew that they were going to add another Sheni, the Rabbanim started teaching B'chas Pesach. The Tanya Shoyalim B'chas Pesach, Kaidon Pesach Shloshim Yom. But if it's 30 days, the Chimati Reish Yarcha Merakinle, if they've already been learning Hilchos Pesach for 2 weeks, from Purim until the end of the month, and now you tell them, oh no, Pesach is not in 2 weeks, we're pushing it off a month. Merakinle, they're not going to take Pesach seriously because we were getting prepared for Pesach as if it's going to be next month, and suddenly, poof, you're saying it's not next month. Won't that cause a problem? Amalei, no. Klal is more sophisticated than that. They know it's not willy-nilly. There's a lot of calculations that have to be made, and sometimes we don't have the latest information until the last minute. It took until now to get clarity in what the cheshbon was, and that's why it was done until now. They will not be mizalzel in Pesach because of that. Okay, we'll stop here. It was a long blot, so I went over a little bit. I apologize, but that Marsha we had to digest a little bit. So everybody have an awesome day, a gebench day, and a freilich and Chanukah.
Shkoyach.
Shkoyach.